What is up, my people? It is your homeboy Roth here, so today I'm going to be reacting to Linkaras' History of Power Rangers RPM Part 1 video. So, in 3, 2, 1, let's do this.
Women in refrigerator.
You still owe me Ranger Series Black. You still owe me 3 minutes of shield sequence training.
Fill me. Coming soon, Women in Refrigerators 2, The Fridge Fights Back. Welcome, my friends, to Power Rangers RPM. Bit of a tangent to start things off, since I'm sure it will dominate the comments section, despite making this video dated. Yes, I saw the Power/Rangers short film. I am not calling it a fan film because that would require the filmmaker to be an actual fan, which he is not. He created it as a parody of grim and gritty Hollywood reboots of silly children's entertainment and holds little or no respect for Power Rangers itself. That's fine, it's not for everybody. That being said, it was also a completely unnecessary film to make, even as a parody. Not that I don't appreciate the idea of parodying it, I just don't feel it was a particularly good parody. Since to many, they did not realize it was supposed to be satire until they were told it was satire. If you liked it, great! I did not, and I feel no need to ever watch or think about it ever again. Although I admit I laughed my ass off at the hip-hop Aikido bit. Now let's get off of this divergence from what we normally talk about by diverging into something else we don't normally talk about. I hate multiple continuities. I just do. I hate it in Digimon, I hate it in Gundam, I hate it in comics, I hate it in Transformers, and yes, I hate it in Power Rangers. It's probably right there with my issue with reboots. You're basically telling the same story over again, and usually not as well. And no, do not take that to mean that reboots or different continuities are always bad. Taking from the examples I just mentioned, many of those different continuities are better than the originals they spawned from. But it's frustrating for me since I prefer an ongoing story. Maybe it's because I come from a background with superhero comic books or even Star Trek, where, until an honest-to-goodness reboot came along, it was a continuous story for decades. The focus may change, the characters will develop, move on, or sometimes regress in the hands of lesser writers, but we're still seeing the next chapter, the next stage. And that's how it is in life. You live for each day, each new chapter of your own existence, and then new people come along after you're gone, new characters in the ongoing narrative of the world. That might be another factor. I don't want to see things end. I want to see things go forth and live on, revealing what the next step is going to be. But don't imagine that I'm blind to the problems with that. Superhero comic books are probably the biggest offender here, where you have a story that has gone on for 60 years, and yet the characters still act like they did back when it started. There are just tons and tons of problems with trying to keep a story going for so long. Different continuities let you explore things you couldn't before, and it allows there to be finality on where they're going to be at the end of their story. Why do I bring all this up? Because today we're looking at Power Rangers RPM, a series that, until a team-up episode in Power Rangers Samurai, was an odd creature that no one could quite figure out if it was in continuity or not. SPD at least had the advantage of taking place in the future beyond what the target demographic was going to care about in terms of whether the future matched reality. RPM is a Power Ranger series that takes place in a post-apocalyptic environment that otherwise seems to be modern times. Unless your next Power Ranger series takes place within that same world, it's going to make team-ups kind of awkward, is what I'm saying. As such, when Power Rangers Samurai had its team-up episode, Clash of the Red Rangers, it was officially declared that RPM existed in an alternate universe. And like I said, while I dislike multiple continuities as a general principle, I'm not really against it in this case. The premise makes it difficult at best to fit it into the continuity otherwise, and we no longer have to scratch our heads wondering, why the hell isn't this team or that team stepping in to help? Hell, we already have a continuity nightmare with SPD giving us actual years it takes place in, but now we have the apocalypse somewhere in there too. As such, the only way to make this work is to either have it be much farther in the future, or just say that it's an alternate universe. Many people were surprised when I said at the end of the Jungle Fury videos that RPM is the most divisive season amongst fans, since there seemed to be an overwhelming amount of people who loved it. Well, I can't speak for their own experiences, only for mine, and the reaction I've gotten from people is both excitement for covering their favorite series, and others hoping I will eviscerate what they feel is something unworthy. I've gotten love and hate for this season in droves. It is rather fascinating to leap into this one like I am. When I first began History of Power Rangers, the series was pretty much over, and RPM was the last one. Perhaps people have gone back and reevaluated it positively or negatively simply due to the fact that new seasons came out, so they no longer had to think about it purely from the standpoint of it being the final Power Rangers series. Mind you, from what I understand, it wasn't going to be the final season. Jungle Fury was. Which definitely would have been a shame. Much as I like Jungle Fury, the lack of connection to other Ranger seasons would have made it a very disappointing note to end the franchise on. It's like Scrubs Season 9. I personally love it and found it funny. It's just they had already had a perfect finale, so while more is nice, it's unnecessary and runs the risk of souring what came before. Which in this case was Overdrive versus Jungle Fury, so I guess if it had ended there, we probably should have just been happy we had a good series to end on. So, RPM, once more the intended finale to Power Rangers. It is rather amusing that keeps happening. The series keeps reaching a natural endpoint, and then it keeps on going. As I've discussed in previous installments, Disney did not really like Power Rangers all that much. Interviews with production people keep telling the same story. Disney seemed embarrassed by Power Rangers. After all, the series had been bought years before strictly to be played in reruns, and it was only allowed to continue due to a slashing of the budget and moving production to New Zealand. From there, apparent executive edicts came down about the violence level of the show, the cost of making it, executives thinking characters were swearing, or just telling the production team to simply dub the Sentai. The greatest enemy of...
I'm confused. How did the Power Rangers swear in the Power Rangers shows? I've never heard any of the Power Rangers swear. Okay? And apparently Disney did not want Tommy to say Usa, Uya, and Dino Thunder because it was quote unquote cursing, even though it clearly wasn't.
Of Power Rangers is and always shall be money. So why wasn't the series canceled after Jungle Fury? Well, bear in mind that all information I know about this is secondhand from other fans and interviews with people and the like, so if I'm wrong, I'm sure the comments will reflect this. Basically, Jetix Europe, a European broadcasting company that handled children's programming and channels, had Disney under contract to continue producing Power Rangers for at least one more season. Hell, Bandai was apparently going to keep making toys whether there was a show or not. I have two different stories of what happens after that, both perfectly plausible. One is that Eddie Gazelian, who had successfully produced many animated series for Disney, realized that Disney had a big opportunity to appeal to boys, since so much of their financial came from the Disney Princesses line, with Power Rangers, and thus wrote up a stirring pitch for the season that would work regardless of what the Sentai footage gave him to work with, and would appeal to older viewers. The other story is that Disney brought on Gazelian already since Bruce Kalish was leaving the show to work on his own original series, and since they had to produce the show anyway, they wanted something drastically different. That the show's sensibilities had been gradually skewing younger and younger, and they wanted something that could appeal to both an older and younger audience. Regardless of whose idea it was, the message was as clear as it was back in Power Rangers in Space. The show is effectively canceled anyway, so screw it, go nuts. Most definitely to his credit, Gazelian actually bothered to watch dozens of episodes of various Power Rangers seasons over the years to formulate his pitch. I'm reminded of Harv Bennett, who was brought on to produce Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, watching all the episodes of the original series in order to figure out how the show worked and how the characters interacted and what was the heart of things. Sure, Gazelian didn't didn't actually watch every episode of Power Rangers, but considering at that point there were almost 700 episodes of the show, I don't think he really needed to see the one where Justin is stuck on his bicycle to understand how Power Rangers works. That being said, there's a difference between watching the show and actually working on it. Talk to any of the people who actually did work on it, and they can tell you how much of a nightmare it can be. Scheduling, acting long hours, and of course, the Sentai footage. Once more, we have a series that was pitched as something serious, and the Sentai footage was goofy as hell. For your enjoyment, Eddie Gazellion's actual reaction upon seeing the Sentai footage. This is a direct quote. Holy shit! I just promised Disney I could turn this into a show that would appeal to an older audience. I must be out of my f***ing mind. Holy shit! Wait, what's on the front of that Zord? Are those motherfucking eyeballs? Add on the fact
That is so funny.